Morning.
Good evening, everybody.
Kabbalah Taraf, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you.
Baruch Hashem.
Okay. Yeah, so yesterday we did bet, but I think we missed one piece in the bet, Yosef. We have to read here. So it says like this, right? That we talked in the tour about the issue of the Asara Batlanim. What does that mean, right? 10 people who are, Social Security guys, pensionerim. So what does that mean? That they're not working, so they have time to be in shul every day. So even if you don't have that, says the tour, you still we'll read on the 15th in those walled cities. Says regarding this bet Yosef, first of all, he brings the source, right? What's the source for this? Sham Gimel Amud Bet, right? There's an Gemara there. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, right? This rabbi says, Karach shen bo asa batlanim didon kikfar. So this rabbi says, right, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, that if you have a walled city which doesn't have 10 people like that, right, idlers, whatever you want to call them, it's considered to be like a village. So meaning what? That we're not going to read on the 15th, we're going to read on the 14th. Something like that. Could be even earlier. והכריחו שם תוספות, והכריחו שם תוספות, עשרה בטלנים נידון ככפר, I'm sorry, והראש, so over there, the Rosh and the Tosfot Paskin, the lo ayre Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi b'mukaf choma. So they said, you know what? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is not talking about a case where, it's a walled city. Kistam krachamu b'chol makom, like where we, usually that's usually the definition that it's a walled city. In every other place. When it comes to reading a Megillah, so he says we're talking about a case where it wasn't surrounded by a wall. It wasn't a walled city in time of Yeshua. So therefore, it's considered to be like a regular walled city, right? Like we have in the whole Talmud. So what does that mean? It means that it's a big city. But if you're talking about regarding being surrounded from the time of Yoshua bin Nun, and sarich asara batlanim, so there you don't need 10 idlers, right? These pensionerim. Rambam also seems to agree with this. The Katav Rav Magid says Rav Magid, so he says there's also another opinion. That even when you have Yoshua bin Nun, right, that condition, you still need 10 idlers anyway. So if you don't have that, Like the 10 idlers, so then it's like just a regular town. Vezeu dat Ramban. That's what the Ramban holds. Okay. Rashba, also the Rashba, right? Zal? Adkan, that's the end of it. Okay, good. So, Velo nitchavra shita zo be'enei Aran. So he says the Ran doesn't seem to agree with this, right? Different opinion, different approach. Komakom katav shema shenahagu achshav. So he says, nevertheless, that which the custom is by nowadays, Eretz Israel, in Eretz Israel, likot b'chamisha asar, to read on the 15th, afa pish verova mekomot en sham asara batlanim. Even though in most places you don't have those 10 idlers, שיהיו בטלנים ממלאכה לעמוד בבית הכנסת, right? To, that they're, idle from work, to be in the shul all the time. You know why that is, right? In those days, Eretz Israel was not really settled so much, so there, the population was very low, and that's the reason why they didn't have that. Today, we have plenty of guys like that, right? We have enough people. Not 10. We have probably 1,000. It's we got no problem with that nowadays, right? But in those days, when Eretz Israel was barren, it was like a wilderness, right? Wasteland. So that's why they didn't have it. Okay, good. So Afilu says, nevertheless, leota shita yesh liyashev oto minhag. But he says, nevertheless, according to that opinion, you can reconcile this custom de lav dafka batlanim. So you can say, like this, that when we say batlanim, right, idlers, we're not really talking about that. Ela kol shedarim sham asara bnei adam. We just need 10 people, basically, right? They can go to minyan. They don't have to be idlers, right? Sholchim boker ve'erev lebet hakneset. So they go to shul, like in the morning for shachrit and in the evening, right? Min charvit. Your average garden variety, shul goer, right? Goes every day, twice a day, and prays all the 3 prayers. Okay. So it says, so it's considered to be as if we have 10 idlers, even though these guys are not really idlers, right? They're just, they just happen to live there and they go to shul, right? They work, but they have time to go to minyan. That's what we're talking about. Okay, good. So then he goes on. So right, we already said in the tour that it has to be that the wall came before, right, the settlement of the town. Right? That's what the tour said. So regarding that, says Maran, right, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, right? This rabbi says, Sham, it's also in the Gemara there. If you have a walled city, right, that was first settled, and then it was surrounded by a wall. Don't get far. So he says that's considered to be like a village, right? So it doesn't have the rule of a walled city. My tama, what's the reason why? Because the pasuk says, the verse says, it says, right, if a person will sell his his house in a city, Shukaf, right? Basov Shashav. So the rule, so it implies this verse that first it was surrounded by the wall and then it was settled. And not the other way around, right? Okay. Perush explains the Moshav Nakud Patach. So he says, right, that the vowel is a patach there, right, in this word. The Husamuch, and which is close by. So it says the implication is that we're talking about a house that is in a walled city. And implies there, right, the wording that the wall came first. The Katav Aran, so says the Ran, שסובר רש"י דווקא לעניין בתי ערי חומה. That Rashi holds, so he says, we're talking about there regarding a house which is in a walled city, hu debainan hu kaf v'sof yashav. So then we require that it was first surrounded by a wall and then settled. But it says when it comes to Megillah, that's a different story. Right? Lo, not so. So it says, but it doesn't seem right to say such a thing. Midiv Arif from the reef, right? In other words, the reef doesn't seem to agree with this, with Iran. Shevia bilchotav, which he brought in his halachot, so he says even the language itself like implies like that, proves it. Shaf le'inyan mikra Megillah itmar. So it was said also regarding the Megillah. The ilo havale lemimar. Because if it wasn't referring to the Megillah, he should have said nidon kebate arei achatzerim. Then we should have said right that considered to be like the house of the city town which has courtyards, whatever. Okay, so Umash Katav Rabbeinu B'Shem Aram Rothenburg, and now what Rabbeinu said, right? The Tur, the name of the Ram, the Lo Mikre Yashav V'Achakach. So he says, you know what? When do we call it that it was settled and then afterwards hukaf and then walled? Like Yashav Tchila Data Shelo Ikifo. That means that they settled it in order, right, on condition or whatever, that not to make a wall. And then all of a sudden they changed their mind, right? And they said, oh, you know what? Let's make a wall. But that wasn't the original intention, according to the Ram. והר"ן כתב דאם תאמר כיוון דאמינן דכך שישב בסוף הוקף נידון ככפר עיר המוקפת מימות יהושע בן נון. So he says, but the Ran says, if you're going to tell me, since we say that the walled city, which was first settled and then walled, it's considered to be like a village, עיר המוקפת מימות יהושע בן נון, היה קוראים בארץ בארץ ישראל. So it says, what about a town which was surrounded by a wall from the time of Yeshua ben Nun? How do we do that in Eretz Israel? How do we read, right? Betet Vav. We read in the 15th. Nichush Dilma Yashav V'Basov Yukav. But maybe we should be concerned, right? That it was first settled and then walled, right? In other words, how do you know that it was the other way around? So then, if you don't know, you have a doubt, right? How can you rely on that and read on the 15th? You don't even know what's going on. If you remember, we talked about this, the other day, right? This issue, right? And what we said was, I think it was in the tour, right? That if there's a doubt, you can assume that the wall came first. That's what we said. So, that solves the problem. But anyway, right? He's asking the question here. The Ran. Okay. So he says, so how do you answer that question? Yesh tomar, yeshivat hagoyim ena yeshiva. So he says, you know what? When the goyim, right, the non-Jews, they settle it, that's not really called settling. So he says, therefore, it turns out that when Yoshua, right, conquered that city in Eretz Israel, there was a wall there, that wasn't settled. So in other words, the goyim, when they settle a town, that we don't call that settling. Why is that, by the way? What, the goy can't settle? What's the problem? So, the answer probably is that yes, of course, physically they settled the place, but since like the way they live their lives, is like kind of like meaningless, they don't do mitzvot, they don't do Torah, so their settlement is not really something which is very significant. You know what I mean? So therefore, right, they just live their lives, the things that they do in God's eyes, are not so important, or whatever. So that's why their settlement is not really so important. Okay, so he says, עד שנתיישבו בה ישראל. Until the Jews came and settled it, that wasn't called settling. ואם תאמר והרי בכל הערים המוקפות חומה, if you're going to tell me, but you know, all these walled cities, מימות יהושע from Yeshua, קוראים בט"ו, they read on the 15th, ואפילו בחוץ לארץ. If you're going to tell me this also applies in outside of the land, right, also diaspora, but didn't you just tell me, right, that the settlement of the Goy is nothing? So then how does that apply to the diaspora, right? So the answer is, ויהי עמד ישיבת הגויים, הנה ישיבה, הרי הן. כאילו לא היו מקפות חומה, מימות יהושע, פינון, לפי שלא היה בהם זמן ישיבה כלל, יש לומר כי אמינן האחי, הנמילה בארץ ישראל משום דכיוון דלעניין בתי ערי חומה, דינן כמוקפים מימות יהושע בינון. So he says, so I can answer you, right, regarding that question, that when we say, right, that it only applies in Eretz Israel, the reason is because that when it comes to, right, the walled cities, that, you know, we're talking about Yoshua ben Nun, מפני שישיבת הגויים אינה ישיבה. Since the yeshiva of the goyim, right, the settlement of the goyim is not really a settlement, אף לעניין קריאת מגילה נידונת כמוקפות. So he says then, if that's the case, also regarding the reading of Megillah, it's called a walled city. מוקפות חומה. אלא דאקתא איכא למדק. So he says, but there's still the one, you know, thing to deduce here. בעיירות המוקפות חומה, that when you have a walled city, right, שבחוץ לארץ, which is in diaspora, ניחוש דילמה קדמה ישיבתן לחומתן. So maybe we should concern, right? Now we have a real concern that maybe the settlement became before the wall, right? And don't tell me, right? Yeah, so don't tell me, right, that it's goyim because over there it's probably Jews. Okay, whatever. Let's see. I'm not sure if I got it right. I'll read it one more time. So it says there is a deduction here that when it comes to the walled cities and outside the land, right, in the diaspora, we should be concerned that maybe, right, the settlement came before the wall. So therefore it's considered like they don't have a wall. So he says, you know how we solve the problem? We say that we go according to the majority, right? Let's do majority. Right? So he says the majority is that, you know, the wall comes before the settlement. You know why that is, by the way? Why is that the majority? Anybody know?
Kabbalah Taraf, the majority where? In the Gemara?
In other words, the majority of cities.
Oh, the majority of cities, not the majority.
Right, the wall comes first, you know?
Okay. Thank you.
So why is that? What's the reason for that? So you know what the answer is? The answer is that because they want protection, you know? They don't want to live there without a wall because they get no protection like that. Right? So, you know, like, you know what happened, right? October 7th, right? Hamas came in, right? So they don't want Hamas coming in, right? And killing people, you know, beheading people. You know what I mean? So they don't want to live there if there's no wall. Right? So, you know, the Zionists, you know, told over there, the people, the dwellers over there, that, you know, yeah, we got a wall, you know, don't worry, everything's protected, you know, but it turns out there was no wall. You know what I mean? So when there's no wall, you're inviting troubles, you know, you're inviting problems, you know, Hamas, you know, God forbid. Hezbollah, you know.
I thought there was a wall, but they cut a hole in it.
Where are you talking about?
Didn't they cut a hole in the fence? That's how they got in?
Okay. Yeah, I figured you were saying that. So you know what the answer is? The answer is that, you know, it's just a fence. You can just cut it, you know, you can cut it with scissors. So when we're talking about a wall, we're talking about like a, you know, like a stone wall, right? Made out of stones, right? So, you know, it's much stronger. But, you know, like when it comes to barbed wire fences, you know what I mean? Anybody can jump over that.
Kabbalah Taraf. So in this case, obviously the wall cannot be the wire, as you explained. So what is considered a wall besides concrete? How tall has it have to be?
In those days, walls were made out of, like, you know, hewn stone, right? They used to hew stone, you know, and hewn stone. And the stone was very strong, you know, very thick. So you couldn't just, you know, break through it like that. You needed like special tools, special, you know, things, you know, it would take a while, you know. So without a wall, you know what I mean? Just you can't, you know, They don't want to live there because there's no protection.
Thank you.
But here's the thing, right? That the Zionists said, but we don't need we don't need a concrete wall. You know why? Right? Because it's electronic defense, So in other words, it has sensors. So if somebody touches it, we know right away that they're trying to break through. But that didn't work, you see, because there wasn't enough people there to defend, So the fact that the fence was electronic didn't help them either. You know what I mean? It wasn't good enough that protection. So you see, right? Well, if you want to talk about the wall, right? Let's go to Mexico, right? We'll see what's going on over there, right? You see what happens when there's no wall. Probably 10 million people have come in, since the new president. You know what I mean? This is what happens when you have no wall. So that's why people don't want to live in a city, especially in the old days, right? Nowadays things are a little bit different, obviously, but in the old days, nobody wanted to live in a town without a wall, and this is the reason why we assume that the wall came first, because otherwise people don't want to be there, right? Not everybody is as foolish as the Zionists, who made that mistake, right? It's pretty foolish what they did. By the way, there's going to be accounting for that, in the end, right? After the war is over, some heads are going to roll, you know what I mean? If you know what I mean. There's going to be some accounting. Okay. We'll see what happens, right? It should be that way, right? Because, there was some heavy-duty mistakes made over there, obviously. Right? Besides the fact that they were having those, dirty, filthy parties, which was also another problem, spiritually. When you're having these parties, and these, crazy Arabs are watching you, what do you expect them to do? They're going to attack you. All right. So that's also another problem. So we got to learn the lessons, of the past, not to repeat them in the future. You know what I mean? On Simchat Torah, you should be dancing with the Sefer Torah, not with some, some sleazy ladies, in the street over there in the field. What kind of thing is that, right? On Simchat Torah, you make a party like that? It's a disgrace. Shame on them, but what can we do, right? We do the best we can. It's a free country, they can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, this is the way it is today. Nobody's right. Nobody's guarding the right. Nobody's in charge. You know what the Rambam says, right? The Rambam says regarding this issue, the main purpose of a government, what I mean, or of a king or a governor, whatever it is, right? President, is that he has to keep people away from sin, That's the whole thing. And this is what we're lacking today. The government doesn't want to, doesn't care about your sins. All they care about is, taking your money for taxes. I mean? That's all they care about. They don't care about what sins you do. They could care less. They say, go do whatever you want, right? It's a democracy. Do what you want. That's not the way it should be, right? The government should be preventing people from sinning, from doing sinful acts. And this is the main job of a king, to keep people in line. You know what I mean? So they shouldn't come to sin. Today everything is money. Give me the taxes. It's a very big corruption of what a government is supposed to be. Unfortunately, Okay, it's all discussion, right? But anyway, getting back to our discussion here. Right, so we're talking about that wall, right? As we said, שכן דרך רוב המדינות המקיפין חומה תחילה ואחר כך מיישבים אותה עד כאן. So this is most of the countries that's what they do, right? In those days, by the way, now in our times, most cities don't have a wall, obviously, right? But in those days, they made the wall first. That was the prevailing method, right, of building a city. Nowadays, by the way, the wall doesn't help you so much. You know why? Because it helps you with Hamas, but it doesn't help you, because they have planes and helicopters and missiles, and so they can get over the wall. They have parachutes, this, that, right? So the wall is not what it used to be. In those days the wall was real protection. Today it's just it's gonna just keep, it only keeps the amateurs from coming over, but the professionals, army, professional army, they can get over the wall easily, right? No problem with that. There's no problem for them. Okay, that's the way it is, right? So the wall today, has already lost its significance, But the truth is, look at what's going on in Mexico, right? So there, it's really significant because we're not talking about an army. We're talking about amateurs that are coming over, these gangsters. You know what I mean? So there, it does really matter. Okay, so that's the story. So yeah. So that's the Beit Yosef that we missed yesterday, right? We didn't read it. So now we'll go ahead to Gimel. If I'm not mistaken. Yes. Yeah, so we did that. So we got to go to Gimel. So we'll go to Gimel, but we have to find Gimel. That's the problem. Can't find it. Let's see if we can find it. Sometimes, the Bet Yosef is not in order. It's like, you got to skip down here, right? Not everything is orderly. See if we can locate that. Don't see it offhand. This was Hay. This was Dalid. Where is Gimel? It could be, by the way, that there is none. There's no Gimel. Possible. Sometimes there is none. You just have a Shulchan Aruch, but you don't have Bet Yosef. Yeah. Looks like there is none. So let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch and see what it says there in Gimel, because must be something there. Maybe it's from yesterday, what we did yesterday. Right, so whatever it was, right? It says, yeah, it's probably from the tour, this. So it says, right, Kfarim v'ayarot gelolot. What about when you have, right, the villages and, the towns, right? Large towns, whatever. Ukrachim she'enam mukafin chuma. Also, cities which don't have a wall. Mimot Yeshua bin Nun, right, from the time of Yeshua bin Nun, Korim Biudalet. So all these places read on the 14th, right? That's the way it is, So, right, that's what we have here in, right, in New York, in America, most places, all places in America, right? Do you know any place in America that was, had a wall in time of Yeshua bin Nun? I dare you to find something like that. You're not going to find it, right? Because Yeshua bin Nun was like, 3,000 years ago. And America is only 300 years. So we're not going to find that, right? So therefore, right, in America, every place reads on the 14th. But as we said, right, in Israel, there are some places that were walled, in those times, because the Canaanites had them walled, right? One of them was Jerusalem. So that's why in Jerusalem, right, we read on the 15th. There's also other places, like Hebron, for instance, right? We know that Hebron was walled. It was a walled city. And there are also several others, like Yafo, for instance, right? Yafo. So now why is Yafo important? Because it's right next to Tel Aviv. It's like they're twin cities, right? Tel Aviv, Yafo. So therefore, right, a lot of people, they say, you know what? Since Yafo was walled at the time of Yoshua ben Nun, and Tel Aviv is right next to it, so we should read in Tel Aviv, it's maybe on the 15th. It's not really sure. So therefore, a lot of people in Tel Aviv, you know what they do? They read twice, both nights, right? 14th and 15th. Because of the doubt. I heard that one time, Maran, the Rabbi, Alav Shalom, he was a chief rabbi of Tel Aviv when he was younger, when he started out. So he read 2 nights, right? Because of the doubt. He was in Tel Aviv. So he read twice. The truth is, we read twice anyway because we read also in daytime. But I'm saying twice and twice, right? 2 times 2, right? Which is 4. That's what he did. Why did he do that? Because it could be that Yaffo, right, is the same Yaffo of today, which was a walled city in Tam Yoshua ben Nun. That's a story. Okay, good. Also, one time I went to visit Israel when I was living here already. One time I went to visit, and I stayed by some people, some my mother's friends. They took me and to host me there. But the problem was, not the problem, but the situation was that this was not in Jerusalem. They don't live in Jerusalem. They live in what do you call it? I forgot the name of that city. Right? It's like whatever. Anyway, right? I'll remember the name of the city. But anyway, right? That city also, there's a doubt if there was a wall there during Yeshua ben Nun. So therefore, when I went to the shul, right, to read the Megillah, because I was there doing Purim. So I went to the shul during Megillah to read the Megillah. They read 2 days, same thing because of the doubt. I went to a Sephardi shul over there, right, and they read twice because it's also doubt, right, whether that place was walled during the time of Yoshua ben Nun. Okay, very good. I'll remember the name of the city, Beth Hashem, before we finish. Okay. So yeah. I just remembered, right? It's Lod. If you look in the book of Yeshua, one of the cities that they conquered, when Yeshua came into the land, was Lod. Right? So Lod, by the way, is right next to the airport, right? It's the airport is in Lod. So it's like, it's a big town today. And there's also doubt about that. So therefore we read twice over there. The truth is, though, that even though we did read twice, and the rabbi also in Tel Aviv, he used to read twice, but it seems like it's more like a chumrah, to do this. You know why? It's like a stringency, because the truth is, the Shulchan Aruch says that when you have a doubt, we read on the 14th, because that's the majority. The majority of people read on the 14th. So therefore, Shulchan Aruch says, if you have a doubt whether it was walled or not, we read on the 14th, right? So the truth is, according to halacha, you're not obligated to read twice when you have a doubt about this. But it seems like they were being machmir, they were being stringent, these people, right? Doing like a chumrah, Okay, so hope you're following me, what I'm saying here. All right, very good. So let's go on a little bit. So here we go, right? Now we're going to talk about that. Says the Torah like this: So it says, if there's a doubt whether this city, was walled during the time of Yeshua, so here he says, right, the Torah, we have to read 2 nights, as we said, right? That's what they did, So there is an opinion like that. You got to read 2 nights. Right, so it says when it comes to the blessing, though, we're not going to bless twice, right? Because there's a doubt there involved. When there's a doubt about a blessing, we don't bless. Right? So therefore, he says, "Mistabra sheikru belo baracha." B'sheni hayamin. ביום ט"ו לא יברכו דשמא אינה מוקפת חומה, וביום י"ד לא יברכו דשמא היא מוקפת ועדיין לא הגיע זמנה, והביא ברכה לבטלה. So he says, right, this rabbi, that since we have a doubt, you should not bless at all, not the first night, not the second night, he says, because you don't really know for sure which one is the right one. So he says, therefore, read twice, right? Which really means 4 times. And but don't bless because we're not sure which is the right time. That's what he says. Interesting. Okay. So he says, ועדיין לא הגיע זמנה, בהביא ברכה ובטלה, וכיוון דברכה לא מעכבה, למה יכניס את זה בספק? So he says, since the blessing doesn't really hold back the mitzvah, that's the rule, by the way, in general, right? No blessing will hold back the mitzvah. So if you did a mitzvah without the blessing, you still got, credit for the mitzvah. You just, the blessing you didn't do. You didn't get credit for the blessing. But you did get credit for the mitzvah. So he says, right, that therefore it's better not to bless at all. You did the mitzvah. Okay, the blessing you didn't get because you have a doubt. What can you do, right? That's the way he wants to do it, right? Okay, good. So והרמב"ם כתב שמברכין בד' כיוון שהוא זמן קריאת רוב העולם בשושן קוראים בט"ו. So but the Rambam says we should bless on the 14th. Why? Because that's the time that most people read, right? The majority of people. So therefore, that's the main right time. That's right. That's the idea. Shushan korim b'tetva, but it says Shushan, right, which is Hamadan, as we said, right, yesterday. We run on the 15th. Even though it's not walled mimot Yoshua from the time of Yoshua, ho'il v'naseh bo nes, because the miracle was done at that time. Okay, ben ir shalach. Okay, so we're done with that, right? Let's see Bet Yosef. Let's see Bet Yosef. Hmm. Here it is. Let's just see how long this is. Yeah, I guess it's pretty long, so maybe we'll do it next time, Bezat Hashem. So I guess we'll stop here. Be blessed with wealth, health, happiness. Chazak Baruch, Laila Tov. Bezat Hashem, we'll see you tomorrow. And keep praying, for our amazing, right, people there in Israel who are taking care of our enemies and destroying them, wiping out their tunnels, the sewer rats over there, right? They're all getting wiped out. They're killing like 100 a day, 200 every day. These terrorists, Nazis, Baruch Hashem. Every one they kill is a mitzvah, not what they say on the news. They say on the news, there's too many people dying. No, it's a mitzvah. Every one of them is a mitzvah. To wipe out Amalek. Amen ve'amen.
Tomorrow is Shabbat.
All the best.
Tomorrow is Shabbat.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Tomorrow
Thank you
is
so
Shabbat.
much.
What about Shabbat? What's the question?
Tomorrow is Shabbat.
Tomorrow is Shabbat, of course. Yes, of course. I always forget. You know how I am.
Okay, I'm just reminding you.
So, Bezat Hashem, we'll see you next week, Sunday.
Sunday.
Ezrat Hashem.
Kavod Harav, thank you so much.
Thanks for the reminder. All the best. Shabbat Shalom.